She was told she was ugly, useless, unmarriageable, a burden, every single day for 26 years. And she believed it. Because when something is repeated long enough, even a lie starts to sound like truth. Then one morning, a mountain man looked at her across a livestock pen and saw something everyone else had missed. He didn't see worthless. He saw a woman who had survived everything and was still standing. This channel tells the stories that last: frontier love, a mother's strength, and the human capacity to rebuild after being torn all the way down. The lesson: your value was never determined by the people who failed to see it. It was always there, waiting for the right eyes. If this story speaks to you, like it, share it, and subscribe. We have more waiting that were made for people who know what it means to keep going. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. Thank you for being part of our community.
Back on the porch, her father, Hank, slammed his hand on the table. "Done," he said, not even looking her way. He described her like a mule for sale. Strong, quiet, won't cause a fuss. The stranger, a mountain man named Elias Boone, just watched him, saying nothing at all. Elias kept his hat tipped low and didn't touch the whiskey Hank poured. "Does she know about this?" he asked, his voice calm. Hank just scoffed. "She don't need to know. She needs to go." Elias pushed a little harder. "I'm asking if she agreed to it." Hank's jaw went tight. "Mister, you want this deal or not?" For a long moment, Elias was quiet. Then he turned his head real slow and looked straight at Mary. She flinched, not from fear, but because it had been years since anyone had truly seen her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet and full of respect. Her father tried to cut in, saying she was shy. Elias never took his eyes off Mary. "I wasn't asking you." That quiet statement hit the porch like a crack of thunder. "Ma'am," Elias said again to Mary, "do you want to come?" Her throat felt tight as a drum. She looked from her father to the rundown ranch, the house where her mother died 7 years ago. Then she looked at this stranger asking a question nobody had ever bothered to ask her before. "Does it matter?" she whispered. Elias tilted his head. "It matters to me." Hank slammed his glass down. "It's done, Boone." But Elias stood up slow, taller than her father by a good bit. "I'll take the deal," he said. "But I ain't buying a woman. I'm offering one a choice." They left the next morning. Everything Mary owned fit in one small canvas sack. 26 years of living, and that was all she had to show for it. They rode north without a word passing between them. The trail took them past the old church where the preacher once told her father Mary's purpose was service, which was just a polite way of saying no man would ever marry her. She remembered her father's grip on her arm that day, hard enough to leave a mark. "Even God can't sell you," he'd said. Now, riding away from it all, she felt numb. After about 3 hours, Elias stopped by a creek. "Water the horses," he said. "You hungry?" Mary just shook her head. He studied her for a second, then pulled some jerky from his saddlebag. He tore off a piece for himself and set the rest on a rock near her, no fuss about it. She stared at it. At the ranch, she always ate last if there was anything left at all. She picked up the jerky and chewed it slow. "How far is your place?" she finally asked. 2 days' ride, he said. "Up in the mountains. It gets cold." She just nodded. "I don't mind the cold." He gave her a look, not of pity, but of understanding, like he knew what it meant to be used to discomfort. "There's a cabin," he went on. "Solid walls, stone fireplace. I built most of it myself. I've been alone a long time, ma'am." Mary knew what that meant. A person can be lonely in a house full of people. She'd been living proof of that for 26 years. That evening, he made camp and laid out 2 bedrolls, keeping a respectful distance between them. As she lay staring at the stars, she found her voice. Elias, why me? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I needed help on the homestead, he finally said, poking the fire. But then I saw you standing by that fence. I've seen critters broke wrong, treated so bad they forget how to live. I know that look. Mary's chest felt tight. You ain't worthless, ma'am, he said, his voice low. Whatever he told you, it ain't the truth. She turned her back to the fire so he couldn't see her face. The next day they reached his homestead. It was a simple log cabin set against a rock ridge, with a creek nearby and a meadow stretching out front. It ain't much, Elias said. It's yours, she replied. It's ours, he corrected her, if you decide to stay. He pulled the saddle from his horse. I meant what I said. You're free to go any time you want. I'll give you a horse and supplies, and point you toward any town you choose. Mary just stared at him, completely baffled. Why would you do that? Because that's how it ought to be. That's not how anything works, she said. He gave a small smile. Well, then maybe it's time it did. She had spent her whole life being told what she was. For the first time, someone was asking who she wanted to be. For days, all she knew was the quiet rhythm of work. Elias gave her the bedroom, taking the spot near the fireplace for himself. He never told her what to do, just laid out the chores that needed doing, fences, traps, the garden, and let her choose. She chose all of it. Work was the only tongue she spoke fluently. Her hands knew how to be useful, even when her spirit felt lost. On the 4th day, she found him setting a new corral post. I can hold that, she said, her first real words to him. He just nodded and handed it over. They worked without speaking until the job was done. Solid, he said, looking it over. You've done fence work before. He said it like a simple fact, a plain acknowledgement that made her stand a little taller. A few days later, checking traps by the creek, she heard horses coming up fast from the south. She grabbed the rifle Elias insisted she carry and hid behind a boulder. 2 rough-looking men rode into view, one with a rope on his saddle, the other with a shotgun. They eyed the cattle grazing in the meadow. Mary's heart pounded, but a new feeling took root. She stood up, leveling the rifle. This here is private land, she said, her voice steady. The man with the shotgun just laughed. Well, look at this little prairie flower playing tough. She cocked the hammer, the click echoing loud and clear. I'm not playing a blessed thing. You can turn your horses around or you can find out how tough I am. The laughter stopped. The men shared a look, and the one with the rope spat on the ground. He grumbled something about it being Boone's place, but Mary stood firm. It's my place, too. After a long, quiet moment, the shotgun rider shrugged. Ain't worth the trouble, he muttered, and they rode off. Mary didn't move until her hands started to shake. When she got back, Elias saw her face and put down his axe. What happened? He asked. 2 riders, she said, looking at your cattle. I ran them off. He stared at her for a good long while. Then he did something that broke through all her defenses. He smiled, a slow, warm smile that said everything. Didn't figure I'd need to worry about rustlers with you around, he said. My name is Mary, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Not ma'am. He picked up his axe and split a log clean in 2. All right, Mary. That one word, her name, made her a person again. She wasn't just a stray or a burden, she was Mary. For the first time, someone said her name like it mattered. Something stubborn and small started beating in her chest again. A feeling she thought was long dead. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the promise of it. And that was more beautiful than anything she had ever known. In the days that followed, an unspoken understanding grew between them. The work felt less like a chore and more like a conversation. They fell into a rhythm, one starting a task and the other finishing it, moving together like they had been partners for years. One day, while he was showing her how to set a snare, his hand brushed against hers. They both froze for just a second, but a warmth shot up her arm and settled deep inside her. He pulled his hand away, his ears turning red, and went back to his work. Mary noticed, and she tucked that little moment away. Later, she was mending one of his torn shirts by the fire. He watched her hands work, not with judgment, but with a quiet fascination. "My mother used to sew," Mary found herself saying. "She made my dresses. After she passed, my father said it was a waste of time." Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What was her name?" In all the years since her mother had been gone, not a single person had ever asked her that. "Ruth," she whispered, the name catching in her throat. "That's a good, strong name," he said softly. Elias looked at Mary, his voice soft as firelight. "I reckon she was a good woman. She raised you." Mary's hands froze, the mending needle shaking. She bit the inside of her cheek, tasting blood, because she would not cry. For years, she had built a wall around that hurt, and she'd be damned if this quiet man with his scarred hands and gentle ways was going to tear it down. "You don't know what she raised," she said, her voice like stone. "I know what I see sitting right here," he replied. "A woman who faced down two armed men without so much as a blink." She stabbed the needle through the cloth. "I blinked plenty. You held your ground. That's what matters." The fire crackled, breaking the silence. "Why are you so kind to me?" she finally asked, the question that sat on her chest like a rock each night. Elias leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. "Mary, I've been on this mountain alone for 4 years. I've talked to my horse more than I've talked to people. I've forgotten how to say things I don't mean. So when I tell you this ain't about pity, you can take that to the bank. I'm kind because you deserve it. And because I think it's been so long, you've forgotten what kindness even looks like." She set the mended shirt down. "I'm going to bed." When she reached the bedroom door, she stopped. "Elias, the shirt's done. Try not to snag the shoulder again." "Yes, ma'am." She shut the door, leaned against it, and for the first time in 14 years, Mary cried. Not from sadness, but from the terrifying relief of being seen as someone who mattered. The next morning was quiet chores and coffee. As she pulled weeds in the garden, she heard it. Not horses, but wagon wheels on the south trail. Elias came out from the barn, his jaw tight. "Stay here," he said. Mary just stood taller. "No, whatever's coming, I'm standing right here." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. He went inside and returned with 2 rifles, handing one to her without a word. When the wagon cleared the trees, Mary's heart sank. She knew that wagon, those horses, and the man holding the reins. She'd spent 26 years learning every angry line on that face. It was her father. Hank Whitaker pulled up 30 yards from the cabin. He looked thinner and meaner, a bottle sticking out of his coat. Behind him sat a young man wearing a marshal's badge. "Well now," Hank said, spreading his arms wide. "There she is." Elias stepped forward, a calm wall between them. "Mr. Whitaker, that's a long ride." "It is," Hank spat. "Seems my daughter's been causing talk in town, folks saying I sold her to some mountain hermit." He jerked a thumb toward the young lawman. "Sheriff sent his boy here to make sure everything's proper." The deputy climbed down, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Boone, ma'am, I'm Deputy Wells. I just need to hear from the lady that she's here of her own free will." "She is," Elias said plainly. "I'd like to hear it from her, if you don't mind." Elias stepped aside. Hank stared at her, a look she knew all too well. It was a look that promised pain for saying the wrong thing. She'd obeyed that look for 26 years. Mary gripped the rifle and met the deputy's eyes. "I'm here because I want to be." "Is that the truth, ma'am? No one's forcing you?" "The only man who ever forced me to do anything," she said, her voice ringing clear, "is standing right behind you." The air crackled. Hank's face twisted in rage. You ungrateful—" "I'm not finished," Mary said, surprising herself most of all. "My father traded me like I was a piece of livestock. He never asked what I wanted. In 26 years, all he ever asked was if my chores were done. In our first meeting, Mr. Boone asked if I wanted to come with him. He told me I could leave any time. He gave me my own room and my own rifle. He has never laid a hand on me nor raised his voice. He's shown me more respect in 2 weeks than my father has in my entire life." Hank lunged forward. "Now you listen here. I'm not a girl," Mary's chin rose, "and I don't belong to you anymore." Hank turned to the deputy, sputtering. "See? He's poisoned her mind." "He didn't have to," Mary said. "He just had to show me what a decent man looked like." That hit Hank like a slap. He took another step, but Elias moved between them, smooth and quiet. "That's close enough," Elias said, his voice low and final. "You threatening me, Boone?" "No, sir," Elias replied. "I'm telling you where the line is." The deputy cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitaker, the lady said she's here willingly. I reckon our business is done." Hank stood there, shaking with fury. He looked at Mary as if for the first time, because the woman holding a rifle with steel in her spine had never been allowed to exist in his house. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "Maybe," Mary answered, "but I'll regret it free." Her father climbed onto the wagon and left without a backward glance. The deputy tipped his hat and followed. Once they were gone, Mary's knees gave out. Elias caught her arm, his grip steady. "Easy now." "I can't believe I did that," she whispered. "I can," he said. His hand was still on her arm. Neither of them moved to pull away. "He'll be back. He'll make trouble." Elias looked down at her. "Let him." She noticed how his gaze never wavered. "You didn't step in," she said. "You let me do the talking." "It wasn't my speech to make. Most men would have spoken for me." "I ain't most men," he said softly. "No," she agreed. "You sure ain't." She straightened up, and his hand fell away. They both felt the space between them. "I should go check the trap line," she said. "I'll come with you," he replied, picking up his rifle. "I want to." They walked together by the creek, quiet, finally headed in the same direction. That night, Mary sat on the porch step watching the stars. Elias came and sat beside her, a little closer than before. "I never did thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not selling me back to him." "I never bought you to begin with," he said, looking at the sky. "You don't owe me thanks for that. A person choosing to stay where they want to stay, well, that ain't a favor. That's just how it's supposed to be." Mary hugged her knees to her chest, making herself as small as she could. It was a habit from childhood, for when the world felt too big. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "You can ask," he replied. "Does not mean I will answer. Why are you all alone up here? A man like you could have a wife, a family, a whole life down in town." Elias was silent for a long moment. Mary figured she had finally crossed a line. "I had a wife," he said at last. "Her name was Elizabeth. She died 6 years ago. The sickness took her and our son in the same week. The boy was only 3. Mary felt the air leave her lungs. I buried them both behind the old cabin down in the valley. I set up 2 crosses and sat with them for 2 days. Then I got on my horse, rode up this mountain, and built this place. I have not been back down since, except to trade." "Elias, I am so sorry." "Do not be sorry," he said. "I am not telling you for pity. I am telling you because you asked. And I figure you know what it is like to lose everything and just keep on living." Mary's eyes burned. "I did not lose everything," she whispered into her knees. "I never had anything to lose in the first place. That is not true." "It is." "No." His voice was gentle but firm as bedrock. "You had yourself. You had your mother's Bible. And you had the grit to get up each morning when you had no reason to. That is not nothing, Mary. That is everything." She lifted her head. Tears streaked her face, but the starlight was in her eyes. "You see too much," she said. I just see what is there. Stop it. Why? Because if you keep talking that way, I might just start to believe you, and I do not know what I would do then." Elias looked at her, his gaze as steady and patient as the mountains. "I reckon you would find out." Mary wiped her face and stood, brushing off her skirt. "Good night, Elias." "Good night, Mary." She went inside the cabin, but he stayed on the porch. As the stars wheeled across the sky, something in the world settled into a new place. It was a feeling more than a sound, as if the mountain itself had decided these two lost souls belonged together. But the world down below was not finished with them. 3 days later, Mary was hanging laundry when she saw them. 4 riders on the southern ridge, moving like they had a purpose. The sun flashed off something metal. This was not a band of rustlers. The man in the lead wore a badge, and the tall man beside him, sitting his horse like he owned the whole territory, was Sheriff Caldwell. Mary dropped the wet shirt and ran for the barn. "Elias!" He came out at a run, saw her face, and looked where she pointed. He did not reach for his gun. He did not curse. He just looked at Mary with those calm, unbreakable eyes and said the 3 words that changed her life. "We stand together." Mary grabbed her rifle from its spot by the door, worked the action, and stood beside him. Not behind him, beside him. The riders stopped 20 yards out. Sheriff Caldwell was a big man with a silver mustache, his face looking like it was carved from granite. 2 deputies were with him. The 4th man stayed back by the trees. And when Mary's eyes adjusted, her blood ran cold. It was her father, Hank Whitaker, watching it all unfold. "Elias Boone," Sheriff Caldwell said, not even bothering to get off his horse. It was a clear message of power. "Sheriff," Elias answered, his voice calm. His rifle barrel was pointed at the ground. "Looks like we have a problem. Seems to me you brought it with you." Caldwell's jaw clenched. "Do not get clever with me, Boone. I have a formal complaint against you. Hank Whitaker says you took his daughter by coercion, that you are holding her here against her will." "That is a lie," Mary said, her voice sharp. Caldwell looked at her as if a piece of furniture had spoken. "Ma'am, I will get to you. You will get to me right now." Mary stepped forward. "I told your deputy I am here because I choose to be. My father was standing right there when I said it. Your father tells it different. My father is a drunk and a liar." "From the trees," Hank's voice cut in. You see what this man has done to her? That is not my daughter talking." Mary's hands tightened on her rifle. "These are my words. They have always been my words. You just never cared enough to listen." Caldwell raised a hand. "That is enough." He looked at Elias. "Boone, I will ask you plain. Did you trade money or goods for this woman?" Elias answered without pause. "Hank Whitaker offered me horses, supplies, and his daughter's help in exchange for work on his homestead. I took the supplies and horses. I told Mary, in front of her father, that she had a choice. She chose to come here." "That is not how a trade works," Caldwell said. "I am not in the business of owning people, Sheriff." "Nobody said owning. But there are laws about a young woman living with a man she is not married to. It is about appearances." "You rode 4 hours up a mountain because of appearances?" Mary asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. Caldwell's face turned red. "I rode up here because your father filed a complaint with the territorial judge, and that judge ordered me to investigate. Now, we can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way." "What does the hard way look like?" Elias asked. "The hard way looks like me taking you to town in irons and letting a judge sort it out." Elias did not even flinch. He just looked at the sheriff with that same immovable calm. "On what charge?" Elias asked. "Unlawful cohabitation. Possible abduction, depending on what the judge says. There was no abduction. She told you that herself. A father says different. And a father's word carries a lot of weight in this territory. More weight than hers." The ugly truth of that sentence hung in the air. One of the younger deputies looked uncomfortable. "Sheriff, maybe we should—" "Just be quiet, Wells." Mary knew him. He was the same one who had come before. He glanced at her. then quickly looked away, ashamed. Caldwell swung down from his horse. He walked toward Elias, his boots thudding on the hard dirt. "Boone, I have known you for 10 years. You are a good man, but the law is the law, and I have a complaint to answer. So you are going to ride back to town with me. We will all stand before Judge Harmon. You will tell your side, she will tell hers, and her father will tell his. The judge will decide, and if I say no, then these boys put you in chains, and we do it anyway. It will just look a whole lot worse for you." Elias turned and looked at Mary. It was not a look of fear, it was a question, the same one from her first day here. "It is your choice." "I will go," Elias said. "No," Mary cried, grabbing his arm. "They cannot just do this." "Mary," his voice was quiet and steady, "if I fight them here, it makes their story look true. If I go with them, I prove my own. And if the judge sides with my father, then you take the mare and you ride wherever you want. You will be free." "I do not want to be free without—" She bit off the words, but it was too late. Everyone had heard them. For the first time, Elias's calm expression cracked. Something deep and powerful moved in his eyes. He gently took the rifle from her hands. "You hold on to this homestead," he said. "I will be back. Do you promise?" He did not answer. Elias Boone never made a promise he was not sure he could keep. He handed his rifle to Caldwell and mounted his horse. Mary stood on the porch, her arms feeling empty, and watched them ride away. Her father was the last to pass. He looked right at her, and he was smiling. That smile did more damage to her heart than any bullet could. It wasn't just cruelty she saw in his smile. It was satisfaction. The look of a man who finally got exactly what he wanted. Control. Even after she stood up to him, he still thought he'd won. Mary stayed on that porch until the riders were just specks in the distance and the dust had settled. All she could hear was the wind and her own heart pounding. Then she walked inside and sat at the table. She wasn't panicked. She was done with panic. She was thinking like a woman who'd spent a lifetime being underestimated and had finally realized that was a weapon. Her father expected her to wait obediently while men decided her fate. That was the old Mary. The new Mary grabbed her mother's Bible, saddled her horse, and rode hard for town. The 6-hour ride over rough mountain trails left her covered in dust, with her legs burning and her hands raw. She reached Ridgeway as the sun was setting. It wasn't much of a town, just one main street. She saw Sheriff Caldwell's horses tied up outside the courthouse. They'd beaten her there, but not by much. Folks stopped and stared as she walked down that street. Mary Whitaker, the girl everyone had written off, walking like she was heading into a fight. Mrs. Garrett stepped out of her store, her mouth dropping open. "Mary, child, what on earth?" Mary just looked at her and said, "I don't care what my father said," and kept on walking. The courthouse was half full of ranchers and townsfolk. Elias sat in a chair flanked by 2 deputies. When he saw Mary walk through the door, his face changed. It was the look of a man who was ready to face the world alone, but suddenly realized he did not have to. Her father, Hank, was on the other side of the room. When he saw her, his smug expression vanished. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. Judge Harmon, a man known for being fair, looked over his spectacles. "I reckon this concerns her," the judge said. "Take a seat, miss." "I'd rather stand, Your Honor," Mary said. A quiet murmur ran through the room. Judge Harmon laid out the complaint. Mr. Whitaker claimed Elias Boone had taken his daughter through a fraudulent trade. The judge asked Elias for his side. Elias stood and spoke plainly, telling the judge he had asked Mary if she wanted to come, and that she was free to leave any time. "Have you touched this woman?" the judge asked. "No, sir," Elias said. Hank shot to his feet. "He's manipulated her. She's a simple girl." That's when Mary's voice cut through the air, clear as a bell. "I am not simple, and I am not a girl. I am 26 years old, and I can sure as heck speak for myself." Absolute silence fell. "Go on, Miss Whitaker," the judge said. Mary's heart hammered, but she met the eyes of every person staring at her. She told them how her father traded her for 3 horses, describing her as strong and quiet, the same words you'd use for a work animal. She spoke of the years of being told she was useless, a burden. "Mr. Boone is the first person in 14 years who has asked me what I wanted," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "He has treated me with more dignity in 3 weeks than I have known my entire life." She looked her father square in the eye. "You did not come here because you care about me. You came here because I stopped being afraid of you." Hank's face turned purple. He sputtered that she was lying. "Any father," Mary said quietly, "would have at least said her name." The room went still again. "In all the years I lived with you, you called me girl. You called me her. You never once, not one single time, said Mary." Hank could not deny it because everyone in that room knew she was telling the truth. Judge Harmon slowly cleaned his glasses. "Mr. Whitaker, I am dismissing this complaint. The woman is of legal age and is here of her own free will." He then warned Hank that if he interfered with his daughter again, he would issue an order against him. He struck his gavel. "We're done." The room erupted. Elias crossed the floor and stood in front of Mary. She was shaking now that it was all over, all the strength she had summoned draining away. "You came," he said softly. "You thought I would not?" she replied. A deputy suggested they leave before her father caused more trouble. Elias put a hand on her back and guided her out into the cool evening air. The street was golden with the last light of the day. People watched from their porches, but Mary did not care. She had walked into that courthouse a person to be thrown away, and she had walked out as herself. As they reached their horses, Elias looked at her ride. "You rode the mountain trail," he said. "Alone." She looked back at him. "You showed me the way. Once was enough." The kindness in his voice did something to her heart she couldn't name. That night, camped under the stars on their way back from town, Mary sat by the fire holding her mother's Bible. "She would have been proud of you," Elias said. "How do you know?" she asked, looking up. "Because I am." Mary held the book to her chest. "Elias," she said, "when we get back, I don't want my own room anymore." The fire popped, and an owl hooted in the dark. He looked at her across the flames, and this time he gave her a full, real smile. "All right," he said. The single word was quiet as a prayer and as heavy as a promise. The look on her face said it all. The crushing weight of 26 years of quiet was finally gone. She had found her voice. She had made her choice. And the man who saw her for who she was sat just a few feet away, a steady presence in the dark. Home, she thought. The word finally felt like a beginning. The ride back to his place was quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet now. The kind of silence shared between two people who had walked through a fire and were still standing. Every part of Mary ached from the long day, but underneath the soreness, she felt something new. It was a feeling like hardened steel. She was never going back to the woman she used to be. Not ever. When they came over the last hill and saw the homestead, it felt right. The cabin came into view, and Mary reined in her horse. Elias asked what was wrong. She looked at the small cabin, the garden, and the porch where she'd watched the stars. "Nothing's wrong," she said. He knew what she meant. "Welcome home, Mary," he said gently. Later that night, things felt familiar but different. They ate their supper in the usual quiet. But afterward, Mary did not go to her room. She sat on the bench by the fire. Elias took his chair across from her. When she told him she meant what she'd said in town, he started to protest. She stopped him right there, threatening to throw her coffee cup at his head. And then a funny thing happened. They both started to laugh. A real deep-down laugh that seemed to shake the whole cabin. They laughed so hard their sides hurt. When they finally stopped, the little cabin felt lighter, like a window had been opened after being sealed shut for years. Elias wiped a tear from his eye. "I ain't real good at this," he said. "Been alone so long, I've forgotten how to be with someone." "You think you're the only one?" she replied. "Before you, my longest talks were with the chickens." He gave her that real smile, the one she had come to cherish. Then his face turned serious. He told her that on the day her father brought her over, talking about her like she was just some chore, he had wanted to knock the man flat. He had never wanted to hit a man so badly in his life. "I looked at you," Elias said, "and I saw a person who was fixing to die inside that house. Maybe not your body, but your spirit. It was fading away, and nobody was even noticing." He leaned forward, his voice low. "I told myself I was just doing a good deed. But that ain't the whole truth. The truth is, when I saw you standing there, something inside me that's been dead for 6 years woke up." The fire popped in the hearth. "I ain't asking for a thing," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm done pretending I brought you up here just to help with the chores." Mary looked down at her own hands, calloused from real work. These hands were not the same ones that had hung useless at her sides for so many years. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Nobody ever taught me." He answered just as softly. "Nobody taught me neither." He said it was the first time he had spoken his late wife Elizabeth's name out loud in a long time. "Tell me about her," Mary said, surprising them both. He described a small woman with a powerful spirit who loved wildflowers. When she got sick, she made him promise he would not stop living, a promise he had broken for 6 long years. "You didn't break it," Mary told him, her eyes meeting his. "You just paused." In his eyes, she saw the light change, like the sun breaking through the clouds. "I like that," she said again. "Elias, I'm moving my things into your room, and if you even think about telling me not to, I swear." He just smiled. I wasn't going to say a word. They stood up, just 3 feet of air and some firelight between them. Mary closed the distance, her hand coming to rest flat on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating strong and fast. "There it is," she whispered. "Proof you're alive." His big scarred hand came up and covered hers. "Mary," he said softly. "Yeah. I'm about to kiss you now, and I won't be apologizing for it. I'd be mighty disappointed if you did." He kissed her with a slow, deliberate care, showing her that every second was a choice, one they had both earned. When he pulled back, Mary kept her eyes shut for a long moment. She'd waited 26 years to be kissed like she was something precious. "Well," she finally said, "that was worth every one of those 26 years." And he pulled her in close, and she listened to the steady beat of his heart. The next morning, shouting tore through the peace. It wasn't Elias, he was already outside. This was a young, panicked voice coming from past the corral. Mary pulled on her dress, grabbed the rifle, and ran out barefoot. She found Elias crouched over a boy in the meadow who couldn't have been more than 14. His face was a mess of bruises and his shirt was torn nearly off. The boy was shaking something fierce. "Easy now, son," Elias said. "No one's going to hurt you here." "They're coming," the boy gasped out. "They took everything. They're coming." "Who's coming, son?" "Dalton's men. Rustlers. They hit our place last night, killed our dog, and beat my pa something awful. Ma sent me to find help." Mary knelt and felt the boy's forehead. He was burning up with fever. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Samuel Pewitt. Our ranch is on the South Fork, about 3 hours from here." Mary looked up at Elias, who was already doing the math. "Dalton's crew," he said, his voice hard. His voice, 4, maybe 5 of them. They've been hitting the high valleys all summer long." "You know who they are?" Mary asked. "I know of them. They hit the Henderson place back in June and took 40 head of cattle." "And nobody did anything to stop them?" Elias shook his head. "The sheriff don't ride this high up unless somebody files a formal complaint down in the valley." Mary's jaw tightened. She looked at young Samuel, at the fear swimming in his eyes. "How many folks in your family?" "Just my ma, my pa, and my little sister. Pa's hurt real bad. Ma's got a shotgun, but that ain't enough." Mary stood and met Elias's gaze. "We're going." "Mary, listen." Her voice was cold as stone. "Don't you tell me it's dangerous. That family needs help, and we're the only ones around." Elias looked at her, saw the steel in her spine, and gave one sharp nod. "Saddle the horses. I'll grab the guns." They worked fast. In 20 minutes, the three of them were mounted and heading south, with Samuel leading them down a steep timber trail. After 2 hours, Samuel reined in his horse. "Smoke," he said, his voice shaking. Mary could smell it too, thick wood smoke from the valley below. "That's no campfire," Elias said, his tone shifting into something harder, the voice of a soldier. "They've burned something." "The barn? The house?" Mary asked, dreading the answer. "Smoke's too thick to tell." A pained little sound escaped Samuel's throat. "We'll get there, son," Mary told him, trying to sound more certain than she felt. They came down out of the trees and saw it. The Puit homestead. The barn was a roaring fire, and the front door of the house was torn clean off its hinges. "You wait here," Elias told Samuel. "But that's my family. And if you ride down there, you'll become another person for me to protect instead of a man I can count on," Elias said sternly. "Watch our backs. If you see more riders, fire one shot in the air." The boy nodded. Elias turned to Mary. "Don't even say it," she said. "I wasn't going to," he replied. "I was going to say stay on my left. I shoot right-handed." They rode down into the wreck of the homestead. The barn groaned as its roof started to give way. "Hello, the house," Elias called out. "Mr. Puit, Mrs. Puit." A shotgun barrel poked out of a window. "Who wants to know?" A woman's voice called back, tight with fear. "Elias Boone. Your boy found us. We came to help." After a long silence, the shotgun disappeared. A woman appeared in the broken doorway, looking thin and aged beyond her years, with blood on her apron. "They took every last head," she said, her voice hollow. "Beat my Tom till he couldn't stand up. He's inside now. Can't feel his legs." Mary was already off her horse. "I need clean water and cloth, whatever you have." "Who are you?" "My name is Mary. I'm here to help your husband." Something in the woman's face seemed to break. "He's in the back room. Please." Mary went in. Tom Puit was laid out on a mattress, his face swollen and his breathing shallow. His leg was bent at a sickening angle. Mary had set bones before on her father's ranch. Hired hands got hurt, and you learned to do things yourself. "Mr. Puit," she said calmly, "this is going to hurt worse before it gets better." "Can't hurt no more than it already does," he rasped. "Oh, yes it can, but you're gonna hold still for me." She worked quickly, tearing cloth for splints, and using a spoon to set the break. Tom Puit let out one awful, choked scream and then went quiet, his jaw clenched tight. "You've done this before," Mrs. Puit said from the doorway. "Too many times." Outside, Elias was reading the tracks by the corral like a book. "5 riders," he announced as Mary came out. "Headed south, driving about 30 head. They've got a 4 or 5 hour lead. Can you track them? The question ain't can I, it's should I. 5 of them against—" He looked at Mary. "2 of us. You'd let me ride with you?" He stood up straight. "Mary, I don't let you do anything. You decide for yourself. That's the only way this works." A powerful feeling swelled in her chest. It was the feeling of being seen for exactly who she was. "Mrs. Puit," Mary called. "We're going after them." The woman stood in the doorway, shocked. "The 2 of you against 5 men?" "Your boy's up on the trail. He'll come down and stay with you. Keep that shotgun loaded. We'll be back by dark. And if you're not? Mary and Elias exchanged a look. We will be, Mary said with certainty. They rode out, following the trail along the creek. Elias had taught her how to read the signs, how to tell the speed of a horse by the depth of its print. He rode with his rifle across his lap, his face set in a way she'd never seen. He wasn't calm. He was focused, like a man getting ready for a fight. Have you killed men before? She asked him quietly. Yes, he said. Does it ever get easier? No. And you should be wary of any man who says it does. I don't want to kill anyone, she confessed. Neither do I, he said. But I want those folks to get their cattle back, and I want to make sure you come home safe. If a gun needs firing, I will fire it, Mary said, her voice steady. I know you will, he replied. 2 hours later, they found Dalton's men camped in a canyon. There were 5 of them, careless and drinking. Elias looked them over and called them sloppy. He told Mary the plan. He would move in close while she provided cover from the ridge with the rifle. He told her if he went down, she was to ride hard and not look back. No, she said, her voice firm as rock. I am not riding away from you, so you just make sure you don't go down. A look of pure admiration crossed his face. Yes, ma'am, he said. Mary set up on the ridge, finding her target in the rifle's sights. When the first shot echoed through the canyon, she fired hers. Dirt kicked up next to a sleeping man and pure chaos broke out. Elias's voice boomed from the rocks, ordering them to drop their weapons. One of them fired blindly, and Mary answered by putting a round into the rock 3 inches from his head. The next one will not miss, she yelled, her voice ringing with a strength she never knew she had. The outlaws looked at each other, then up at the ridge. They were caught, and they knew it. To those scared men, it must have looked like a whole posse. One after another, their guns hit the dirt. Elias stepped out from the rocks and said, Start walking south, don't stop. If I catch y'all up here again, there will be no warning shot. They scrambled away, 5 men sent running by 2. Because Mary and Elias had something to fight for, while the rustlers only had cheap whiskey and stolen goods. Mary stayed on that ridge until they were long gone, and only then did her hands begin to shake. She leaned her forehead against the cool rifle and just breathed. When she climbed down, Elias was already rounding up the cattle. He looked at her, covered in dust but alive. You shot at his head, he said. I shot near his head. There is a difference. He walked over, took the rifle from her trembling hands, and pulled her into a hug so tight she could feel his heart beat. Don't you ever scare me like that again, he whispered. And don't you ever ask me to ride off without you. They had a deal. They got the cattle back to the Puit place just as the sun was setting. Mrs. Puit stood on her porch, shotgun in hand, watching 30 head of her cattle file back into the corral. Then she just sat on the steps and cried. Her boy, Samuel, ran out to count every last one. He turned back, his bruised face breaking into a huge grin. They are all here, he yelled. Who are those folks? Tom Puit asked from inside the house. Mrs. Puit wiped her face and stood tall, looking at Mary and Elias with a kind of gratitude that went deeper than words. They are neighbors, she said. We have neighbors. That word, neighbors, settled over Mary like a warm blanket. She had never been a part of something, had never belonged. They stayed just long enough to see that Tom was resting easy and that Mrs. Puit had what she needed. You come back now, you hear? Mrs. Puit said, grabbing Mary's hand. Come back for a visit. I would surely like to have a friend. Mary just squeezed her hand back, unable to speak. They rode home under a sky full of stars. Elias and Mary rode close, their knees almost touching, bone-tired but full. Elias, she started. We did a good thing today. He nodded. We surely did. I have never done a good thing before, not one that mattered. That is not true, he said softly. You matter to me, and that is a good thing every single day. She reached over and took his hand, and he laced his fingers through hers. They rode the rest of the way home like that, quiet and complete. At the cabin, Elias tended to the horses while Mary went inside to start a fire. She put coffee on and stood in the middle of the room. 3 weeks ago, she had arrived with nothing. Now this place was theirs. She heard his boots on the porch, and he came in smelling of horse and gunpowder in the night air. "Coffee is on," she said. "I know, I could smell it from the corral." They sat on the bench by the fire, shoulder to shoulder, too worn out for talk, but too full to be silent. "Elias," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I love you." It was a simple fact, proven by fire and fear. Elias set his cup down and took her face in his scarred, gentle hands. "I love you, Mary. I have been loving you since the day you stood by that fence, and I could not look away." She put her hands over his. "Then stop looking away," she said. And he did. 3 weeks turned into 3 months. The mountain did not pay attention to calendars. Every morning, Mary woke up next to Elias, and for a few seconds, she had to remember it was real. The arm around her waist belonged to a man who never raised his voice. The cabin smelled like coffee, and the only sounds were the wind in the trees and the creek outside. Some mornings, the remembering made her smile. Other mornings, it brought a gratitude so fierce it felt like an ache. This morning, she woke up to find Elias already on the porch, staring south with a cup of coffee in his hand. "What is it?" she asked, her hand going to the rifle by the door out of pure habit. "Easy now," Elias said. "Just one rider coming up slow. That is not how trouble travels. The last time a lone rider came, it was a lawman with my father." "Fair point," he admitted. "But this one is on the trail from the Puit Ranch." It was Samuel. The boy had grown in 3 months, looking taller and stronger. The bruises were gone, replaced with a healthy color and a new confidence. He rode right up to the cabin with a wide grin. "Morning, Miss Mary. Mr. Boone." "Samuel," Mary said, leaning on the porch rail. "Does your mama know you're out here by yourself?" "She sent me. I have got a message for you." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Mary took it and read it twice, her hand starting to tremble. "What is it?" Elias asked. Mary looked up at him, her eyes bright with an emotion he could not quite place. "My father is dead." The words fell onto the porch with a thud. Elias put his cup down. "When?" "3 days ago." His heart gave out. Mrs. Garrett from town wrote that the hired hands found him alone in the house. Samuel looked uncomfortable with the heavy silence. "Should I go, Miss Mary?" "No, Samuel, stay and have a biscuit." The boy tied up his horse and went inside. Mary just stood there, staring off into the distance, the letter still in her hand. Elias knew to wait. Mary worked through things in quiet first, with words coming later. "I do not feel a thing," she finally said. "And that is all right?" "No, it is not. He was my father. I'm supposed to feel something." "Says who?" She looked at him. "Everyone. The whole town, the preacher, all the folks who will whisper about how I did not even show up for his funeral." "Do you want to go?" "No," she said. "I want to feel something real, not what I am supposed to feel." "Then what do you feel?" he asked gently. She folded the letter in her palm and answered with the plain truth. "Free," she whispered. "I feel free, and I hate myself for it." Elias took the letter in her hands. "You spent 26 years with a man who treated you like property. You do not owe him your grief, Mary. You do not owe him a single tear." "But he died all alone," she said, her voice breaking. "He chose that," Elias said, his voice firm but kind. "Every time he pushed you away, every time he called you worthless, he chose to be alone. You did not do this to him. He did it to himself." Then why does it hurt so much? Because you are a good person, he said. And good people hurt, even when they have no reason to. And then she finally broke down and cried. It was not anger like before, but a deep, formless sorrow for the father she never had. Elias just held her on that porch, solid as the mountain beneath them, letting her feel all of it. When the tears stopped, she straightened up. I want to go down there, she said. To town? To the ranch, not for the funeral. I want to visit my mother's grave. It has been too long. And then she told him. The ranch is mine now, Elias. Mrs. Garrett says the lawyer in town has the papers. Elias's face was still as a stone wall, but Mary could see the thoughts churning behind his eyes. A ranch down in the valley, land, a life she could have without him. She saw his fear plain as day, just like he always saw hers. Don't you even think it, she said, her voice soft. I didn't say a thing. You didn't have to. I can hear you thinking from clear over here. She laid her hand flat on his chest, right over his heart, just like that first night. I'm not going back there to stay. I'm going to settle what needs settling, and then I'm coming right back home. He asked, Want me to come with you? She smiled. I want you to always come with me. They rode out 2 days later. They left Samuel to watch over the homestead, a job the boy took on with more pride than most grown men. Riding into that valley felt like a punch to the gut for Mary. It wasn't the scenery, she hardly saw it. It was the feeling, a heavy weight, like the big open sky she'd gotten used to was closing in on her. They got to the ranch about noon. The whole place looked like it had been given up the ghost long before Hank did. Fences were rotted through and the barn was leaning hard to one side. The little garden she tended as a girl was just weeds and cracked earth. Mary swung down from her horse and just stood there. The house was quiet. The door was shut tight, and the windows were dark as a pocket. You don't have to go in there, Elias said gently. Yeah, she said. I do. She pushed the door open and the smell hit her first. Stale whiskey, old dust, and pure neglect. The very table where her father had signed her away was still there, one leg held up by a book. The kitchen, where she must have cooked 10,000 meals, was a disaster. Greasy plates were piled in the sink, and empty bottles stood on the counter like a little glass army. She walked through each room. She touched nothing. She just looked, letting herself see it for what it truly was. It wasn't the prison she remembered. It was just a sad, small house where a sad, small man had drunk himself into the grave because he drove off the only person who might have saved him. In her old room, which was hardly bigger than a closet, she found the shelf where she'd kept her mother's Bible. The shelf was empty. She'd taken the Bible with her, the only thing of value. But tucked behind it, pushed into a crack in the wall, was a photograph. It was small and faded with a bent corner. It was her mother, Ruth Whitaker, looking young and smiling, holding a baby Mary in her arms. Mary pulled it free and held it tight to her chest. There you are, Mama, she whispered. She walked out of that house and didn't look back once. Elias was waiting. He saw the picture in her hand, but he didn't ask. He just nodded. They rode over to the cemetery. Ruth Whitaker's grave was covered in weeds. The name on the old wooden marker was almost gone. Mary got on her knees and started pulling those weeds with her bare hands until the plot was clear. She laid her palm flat on the dirt. I'm all right, Mama. I found a good man. You'd like him. He's quiet, like you were, and he sees me. He really sees me. She placed a wild flower on the grave, one she'd picked and pressed in her saddlebag. It reminded her of how Elizabeth Boone used to press flowers in books, and it felt like a circle was closing. I'm going to get you a proper stone, Mary said, her voice thick, with your name on it. Your real name, Ruth. Just Ruth. When she stood and brushed the dirt from her knees, Elias was standing about 10 feet away, hat in his hands, head bowed. "Ready?" he asked. She took a deep breath. One more stop. The lawyer's office was a cramped little room above the general store. A man named Prescott, with ink on his fingers and glasses thick as bottle glass, greeted them. "Miss Whitaker, my condolences about your father." "Thank you. I believe you have some papers for me." Prescott sorted through a pile on his desk. "Indeed. Your father left no will, which means the ranch passes to you. 40 acres, the house, and what's left of the livestock." He looked at her over his glasses. "It's not in the best of shape, I'm afraid." "I know," she said. "What are you planning to do with it?" Mary glanced at Elias, who stood by the door with his arms crossed, his face showing nothing. He was leaving it all to her. "Sell it," Mary said. Prescott blinked. "All of it?" "Every last acre. The house, the land, all of it." "Miss Whitaker, are you sure? Land in this valley is—" "I'm sure, Mr. Prescott. I don't want it, I don't need it, and I won't let it be an anchor on my soul." The lawyer straightened his glasses. "Very well. I can handle the sale. Now, where should I send the money?" Mary smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. "To the Pwitt family, at the South Fork Ranch. Every single cent." Elias's head snapped toward her. He just stared. She could feel his gaze on her, warm like the sun. "All of it?" Prescott asked, stunned. "All of it," she repeated. "They have a barn that needs a new roof and a man that needs a doctor. That money will do more good for them than it ever did for my father." Prescott wrote it all down, slow and careful, like a man who knew he was part of something important. "I'll need you to sign right here. Miss Whitaker." "It's Mrs. Boone." The words were out before she even thought them. She felt Elias go completely still behind her. "I beg your pardon?" the lawyer said. Mary turned clear around to face Elias. He was standing there, holding his hat, with a look on his face she'd never seen before. It was wide open, with none of the walls he'd built around himself in 6 years on that mountain. "If you'll have me," she said softly. Elias crossed the room in 3 long strides. He took her face in his hands, gentle as he had the first time she said she loved him. "Mary," he said, his voice rough, "I've been yours since the moment you stood up to those rustlers." "Is that a yes?" He grinned. "That's a yes, a hallelujah, and an amen." Prescott cleared his throat. "Well, I can draw up a marriage certificate if you'd like. I'm a notary, and in this territory that's about the same as a preacher." "Do it," Mary said, looking at Elias. "Right now." They got married right there in a lawyer's office above a general store. There were no flowers, no music, and no family. Prescott read the vows from a book. Elias said, "I do," like he'd been waiting his whole life to say it. Mary said, "I do," like she finally understood what the words were all about. After it was done, Prescott stamped the certificate and shook both their hands. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Boone." They walked out into the bright sunshine. Folks on the street stared, of course. Mary Whitaker, Mary Boone now, walking down Main Street arm in arm with the mysterious mountain man they'd all whispered about. Mrs. Garrett was standing right outside her store. She looked at Mary, then at Elias, then at how Mary's hand was resting so naturally in his arm. "Mary Whitaker," Mrs. Garrett said, her voice full of wonder. "What have you gone and done?" "Got married?" "To who?" Mary smiled. "To the only man who ever asked me what I thought." Mrs. Garrett's eyes welled up with tears. She put her hands over her mouth, then stepped forward and gave Mary a hug so tight it took her breath away. "Your mother," she whispered, "would be dancing in the streets." They left town that afternoon for the last time, riding north, headed home. The word didn't feel strange anymore. It felt solid, fixed. Home. When they got back to the homestead, Samuel was on the porch whittling a piece of wood. He saw them and jumped right up. "Everything all right? Was there any trouble?" "No trouble," Elias said with a smile. "We got married." Samuel's jaw just about hit the porch floor. Then he let out a whoop so loud it sent the chickens scattering. "Wait until I tell Ma. She's going to cry for a whole week." "You tell your mama something else for me," Mary said, swinging down from her horse. She looked at that boy who'd ridden through the night to save his pie. "Tell her all the money from my father's ranch is coming to y'all. Every last bit of it." Samuel just stared at her. "Miss Mary, Mrs. Boone, we can't take that." "You can and you will," she said firmly. "Your pa needs a good doctor, your barn needs a roof, and your mama needs to rest easy for once. That money can't bring my father back, but it can help your family get back on its feet. That's what it's for now." The boy's eyes started to glisten. He wiped them quick with his sleeve, like boys do when they're trying to act grown. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking. "Now go on home, Samuel. Go tell your family." He got on his horse and rode south, turning once to wave. Mary waved back. Then it was just the two of them, the way it started. But everything was different. That night, Mary sat at their table. She propped her mother's photograph against the salt jar and laid their marriage certificate out flat right beside it. She stared at those two papers, just marveling at how a life could turn on a dime, how a woman could wake up one morning belonging to someone else and lay her head down that same night, a wife, a partner, a person with her own name on a legal document. Elias came in from the corral and sat down across the table. He said, "I am thinking about building a second room." "What in the world for?" "For the future." Mary looked up. He was watching her with that steady, patient look of his, the one that never seemed to quit. "You thinking about babies, Elias Boone?" "I am thinking about possibility. I have not thought about that in 6 years. Are you not scared?" "Terrified." "Good. Me too. Then we will just be terrified together." She reached out and took his hand, tracing the scar on his palm. "I want to plant flowers," she said, "all along the path to the creek. Wildflowers like the kind Elizabeth used to press." Elias's breath hitched. She felt his hand squeeze hers. "You do not have to do that," he said, his voice all rough. "I want to. She was a part of this place before I was. Her and your boy. They ought to be remembered." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, then closed his eyes. "Ruth and Elizabeth," he said. "What?" "If we ever have us a daughter, we will name her Ruth and Elizabeth, both names." Mary felt her throat tighten up. She pressed a hand to her mouth and breathed through the feeling that washed over her. "Ruth Elizabeth Boone," she whispered. "Now that is a name with meaning. That is a name that means everything." The weeks rolled by. Summer settled on that mountain in a blaze of gold and green. Mary planted her wildflowers. Elias built the second room. The Puits came for supper one Sunday, and just like Samuel said, Mrs. Puit had a good cry. Word started to spread through the valley the way it does. It was the story of Mary Whitaker, a woman traded for 3 horses, sent up a mountain who found love and fought like heck for it. Down in town, young women started saying her name like a legend in the making. One afternoon, Mary was out pulling weeds when she heard a horse coming up the trail. She stood and shaded her eyes. It was a girl, maybe 17 years old, on a tired-looking horse, with nothing but a canvas sack. She stopped at the edge of the yard and just sat there, her shoulders all slumped, looking at Mary like she was a lighthouse in a storm. "Are you Mary Boone?" the girl asked. "I surely am. I am Clara Jennings. Mrs. Garrett in town told me where I could find you. What can I do for you, Clara?" The girl's chin started to tremble. She was holding the reins so tight her whole hand shook. "My daddy says I have to marry Mr. Thorne, the banker. He is 53. I am 17. Daddy says it is a good match. He says I ought to be grateful." Mary put down her garden hoe. "Well, "Get down off that horse," she said. "You come on inside. I have got coffee on." Clara slid down, tied her horse to the rail, and followed Mary in, clutching that sack to her chest. Elias was at the table cleaning his rifle. He looked up, saw Clara's face, and saw the dark bruise on her wrist she was trying to hide. He stood right up. "I will be in the barn. You stay," Mary told him. He looked at her, and she looked right back, and a whole conversation passed between them without a single word. He sat back down, pushed the rifle aside, and poured a third cup of coffee for Clara. The girl wrapped her hands around that cup like it was the first warm thing she had felt in a month. "Tell me everything," Mary said. "Start from the very beginning." Mary let the girl finish her story, just listening. Then she leaned forward. "All right, here is what we are going to do. You will stay here with us tonight. Tomorrow morning I'm going to ride into town and have a word with your father." The girl shook her head. "My father will not listen." "Then I will speak with Judge Harmon," Mary said. "And he will." "How do you know?" "Because I stood up in that same courthouse, and I told the truth. The truth won that day, and it is going to win for you, too." Elias watched his wife in the firelight. He saw the strength the mountains had carved into her face. He saw the daughter of Ruth Whittaker and the successor to Elizabeth Boone. This was the woman who faced ruin with empty hands and refused to be broken. He turned to Clara, his voice low and steady. "You can stay as long as you need. No one will take you from this home unless you choose to walk out yourself." The girl looked from Elias to Mary, then she covered her face and began to cry. Mary went to her side and put her arm around the girl's shaking shoulders. "It is all right," she said softly. "You are safe now." Through her tears, Clara whispered, "How did you do it? How did you stop being afraid?" Mary's eyes found Elias across the room. He returned her gaze, steady and unbreakable. "I never stopped being afraid," Mary told her. "I just found something worth being brave for." Later that night, after Clara was asleep in the new room, Mary stood on the porch looking at the stars. Elias joined her, his arm settling around her. "We are going to keep on doing this, are we not?" he said. It was not a question. "Doing what? Taking in folks who get lost?" "We are not strays, Elias. We are people who lost our way for a while and then found it again." She leaned against him. "I used to think God had forgotten me, that he looked away when Mama died. But now I think he was just waiting for me to find my way to the right place. To you. This place is you." He kissed the top of her head and held her tighter. The wind moved through the aspens. Mary Whittaker Boone stood on that porch near Timberline, held by a man who only ever wanted her to be herself. Down below, the valley of people who ignored her for 26 years had started saying her name with respect. Behind her, a young girl slept in a safe room built on hope. The sky above was so big it made every cruel thing she had endured seem small. She had been traded like livestock and cast aside by the one person who should have protected her. But she had turned all that pain and silence into a life so full of purpose and stubborn joy. No one would ever own her. No one would ever trade her again. And Mary Boone, strong, unbreakable, and finally free, was just getting started.